Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how to install, configure and use Windows Server 2019. My name is Ashish and this channel is all about showing you how to become a highly paid IT professional, and that too fast. So let's get started. In this video we are going to cover the following topics. We'll first introduce Windows Server 2019. We'll talk about the Windows versions of Windows Server 2019. We'll also do a quick overview on the desktop. Then we'll talk about the server manager. We'll talk about roles and features. We'll also look at adding other servers to manage within server manager. Then we'll talk about some of the tools that are available within Windows Server 2019. And then we'll look at computer management. We'll also look at Windows PowerShell. We'll also look at the local security policy and then installing applications in Windows Server 2019. So now let's get started. So first thing first, before we even get to installing Windows Server 2019, let's talk about the product itself. So Microsoft has two distinct operating systems. So one is for the desktop environment. So Windows 10, Windows 8.1, Windows 8, Windows 7, these are the desktop operating systems. But when you talk about Windows Server 2019, this is a server level operating system. When I say server level operating systems, it can be configured in different ways. For instance, it can be configured as a domain controller, it can be configured as a DNS server, DHCP server, or it can be simply configured as a web server or a file server. So now a little bit about Windows Server 2019. Now it all started with Windows NT 3.1. That was back in 1993 when Microsoft took out the first server level product. Then it moved on to Windows NT 3.5, Windows NT 3.51. Then Windows NT 4.0 came. Now that was the time when it was known to be the most stable Windows operating system from Microsoft. Then eventually Microsoft revamped the entire Windows NT product and they launched Windows Server 2000, which was launched on February 2nd, year 2000. From there onwards, Windows Server 2003, which again was a better product than Windows Server 2000. And Windows 2000 was the first time when Microsoft actually introduced Active Directory. And from there onwards, Active Directory has been part of Windows Server product series. After Windows Server 2003, Windows Server 2003 R2 came, which is release 2. And there were some bug fixes in that particular product. Then from there, the next version that came was Windows Server 2008, which was launched on February 27th, 2008. And then came the Windows Server 2008 Release 2 or R2, which was released on October 22nd, 2009. And from there onwards, it was Windows Server 2012, launched on September 4th, 2012. Then came the Release 2 of 2012, which was in October 2013. Then finally came the Windows Server 2016 product, which was launched on October 12, 2016. And then came the product which we are going to talk about, which is the Windows Server 2019, which was launched on November 13, 2018. So this is the little background how it evolved from Windows NT 3.1 to Windows Server 2019. Now, when you talk about the versions of Windows Server 2019, so there is Windows Server 2019 Essentials, then there is Windows Server 2019 Standard, and then you have Windows Server 2019 Data Centers. So these are the three different versions of Windows Server 2019 that are available. You can go ahead and read through the Microsoft website. You will get more details about what each version is supposed to be meant. In most of the scenarios, you will typically use Windows Server 2019 Standard Edition, but for larger tasks such as load balancing and other things, you would probably go with Data Center. But we are not going to be using Data Center, so therefore we are not going to talk about much on it. And now, when we talk about installing Windows Server 2019, there are two different ways you can install Windows Server 2019. So one is you can install it on the physical server, or you can install it in a virtual machine. So we are not going to install on the physical server in this environment. So we will use VirtualBox, which is a product from Oracle Corporation. We will use VirtualBox to install Windows Server 2019 as a virtual machine. Now, if you see the environment that I have set up here, so I have Linux Mint, I have Linux, another variant of Linux which is CentOS, then another variant of Linux, Kali Linux, which is mainly used for penetration testing and ethical hacking. And then I also have a virtual machine which is Windows 2K19. So I already have installed one copy of Windows Server 2019. But in any case, just to demonstrate to you, I will go ahead and create a new virtual machine and walk you through the installation. So I just click on this new button, then this create a virtual machine dialog box pops up. So I will simply name it as Windows Server 2019. And then I have to select the type. So by default it is Windows and version is by default Windows 7. So I'm going to just scroll down and select Windows Server 2019 64-bit. And I move ahead. So I'll need to define the RAM size. So by default, it automatically picks up 2 GB, which is 2048 MB. And I'll just leave that to it and click on next. So I'm going to create a new virtual hard drive now. This is the default option. And if I don't want a hard drive, or I want to basically create a new hard drive, I can choose the second option, which is the default option, or I can use an existing virtual drive. So I'm just going to keep the default option of creating a new virtual hard disk and click on create. So then it asks me what kind of hard disk type do I want. So I'm going to just keep the default option, which is VDI, that is the VirtualBox disk image. And there are other options like VHD, which is mainly used with products from virtualization products from Microsoft, something like Virtual Server, or VMDK, which is mainly used with with VMware products. So I'm going to keep the VDI option and click on next. Now, when you are installing a virtual machine, there are two options you get. Either you fix the disk size right at the start. So for instance, if you've allocated 20 gigabytes of disk space, it will use all that disk space at one go in the start. So it will create a disk which is of 20 gigabytes in size. Or you can use the option dynamically allocated, which is it will start with the smallest size. As and when required, it will keep on increasing the disk size. And of course, there is a capping that you have put, which is the 20 gigabytes. So it will go up till that much size. So I just keep the dynamically allocated option selected and I click on next. Now, by default, based on whatever operating system you select or whatever type of variant of operating system you select, let's say Windows 7 versus Windows Server 2019. So there are some predefined templates which will automatically assign the memory or the disk space. So for Windows Server, notice that it automatically assigns a disk space of 50 gigabytes. And you have an option of creating a 2 terabyte hard drive as well. So that is the maximum limit. So we are just going to keep the default 50 gigabyte and click on create. So once we do that, notice that there is a Windows Server 2019 virtual machine appears. Now, there are certain settings given in the right pane. So it has the general section which defines the name and the operating system. It has the base memory. Then it has the boot order, which is the floppy optical drive, which could be your DVD drive. And then it has the hard disk. And then there is an acceleration. By default, it is taking VTX-X and AMD-V and nested paging. Display is automatically set. Then there is storage that is automatically set. Now, there are two options in storage. So one, I do not assign the ISO image. That is basically the set of installation files right now. And I leave it as is. Once the virtual machine boots up, it will prompt me to select that particular ISO file to install Windows Server 2019. Or I could simply assign the physical DVD if I have inserted into my host system's DVD drive. So we will assign that image right now. So I just click on that optical drive and it says choose or create a disk image. So here because I had already created one Windows Server 2019 image, so I'm just going to go ahead and select this particular option. Then it says audio. So it is going to use the host system audio. Network, it is already selected one particular option. So it's selected NAT and it is using the Intel Pro /1000 MT network adapter. So I'm going to just click on network and I'm going to choose the NAT network which I have created as a network. So what it is going to do is it will use the host system's internet connection and it will be able to connect to the host system and then eventually go on to the network. Then there is a USB controller there that is there. I can also define the shared folders. So I can share a folder on my host system or other virtual machines, and I can connect those shared folders onto this virtual machine, and I can simply define the description if I want to. So for instance, if I just click on this, I can simply say Windows Server 2019 installed on today's date. So let's say Jan 14th, 2021. So that is the description I have given. So that description appears here. Now we have done most of the settings. So let's get started. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on start. And it should launch the virtual machine window in a couple of seconds. So here you go. So it starts with the virtual machine window and it is starting the virtual machine. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this particular notification. So now it's picked up the ISO image which I had mapped as the, one of the boot devices. So remember, the first boot device was floppy. Obviously, it doesn't find anything in the floppy. So it goes to the second boot device, which is the optical drive. That is where I have mapped the ISO image. So it starts with the installation. So I'm just going to go ahead and close the notification. So, okay, it says language to install. We will keep the default English United States. Time and currency format, English United States. Keyboard layout, I'm going to keep it as the default US. Click on next and then here you go. It prompts you to click on install now. So I go ahead and click on install. And there you go. The setup is now starting. So mind you, this particular installation will probably take the complete hour. So here you go. Now there are different options that I have to select. So I can either do the standard evaluation or I can choose the data center evaluation. But then there is a desktop experience option as well. So I'm going to just go ahead and select this option. What it says is this option installs the full Windows graphical environment, consuming extra disk space. It can be useful if you want to use the Windows desktop or have an app that requires it. So it is best to use this particular option. So I'm just going to go ahead and use and click on next. I have to accept the license terms without which I cannot proceed further. So I go ahead and accept it and then click on next. So now there are two options. If you had a previous version of Windows that you wanted to upgrade, so you would choose the first option. Now it will upgrade the existing Windows version to Windows Server 2019. So the file settings and the applications are moved to new version of Windows. And this option is only available when there is a supported version of Windows is already running on the system. Now, basically what happens is, if for instance, if you are thinking that if you are going to use Windows Server 2000 and trying to upgrade it to Windows Server 2019, you will not be able to do. So you'll have to go back to Microsoft's website and find out which versions are supported for upgrade. So for instance, you can do Windows Server 2016 upgrade to Windows Server 2019. So go through the Microsoft recommendations in terms of upgrade. Then the second option is the custom option, where you do a fresh installation of Windows. So I'm going to just go ahead and click on this option. So now we had a 50 GB of hard drive. that we had allocated. Now, currently it is unallocated because it is not formatted. It is not being used. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply go ahead and click on next. But there is another option that I can, click on new and format this hard drive and do a lot of things. But I'm going to skip it because Windows will automatically take care of it. So I click on next and let's see what happens after this. So there you go. So installing Windows dialog box appears. Now this is basically going to take quite some time. So it's already copied Windows files. Now it is getting the installation files ready for use. So this is where it will take quite some time, and it's going to start, getting these files ready for installation. And beyond that, then it will install features, and then it will go to the internet and install updates if there are any. And finally, it will wind up the installation and will be able to log into Windows. So let's see what happens. So it's copying. So it's now done about 4%. And one thing we have to always remember when we are part of the IT services, like we are a part of the IT support team, or we are part of the team which does the operating system installations or application installations, one thing we must always remember that we must be patient, because lot of installations take a lot of time. Bigger the application, more installation time it will require. Some of the applications will be complicated to configure. So you must develop a lot of patience and ensure that you are able to continue with this without, getting impatient. So learn to watch and observe the installation process. I know here you have nothing much to do. You have to just simply watch. But look at the progress it is making, because sometimes people tend to just walk away from the installation and let it happen, and they return after, let's say, an hour or so, and by that time they figured out that the installation would have already completed some half an hour back. So you end up wasting a lot of time. So therefore, I always recommend that you must sit through the complete installation process and watch it. And of course, this is the manual installation we are doing, but there are different ways of installing Windows Server or Windows desktop operating systems like Windows 10. You can always automate the installation where you don't even have to sit through it. You can create a auto installer script, and that will automatically do the installation for you. You have to define the parameters like the system name, the username, whether the user is going to be the administrator or not, how much disk space do you need. All those kind of parameters you can define in that installation script and simply execute that installation script. Rest, everything happens automatically. And then there is a third method. When you are in an enterprise environment, then there are ways you can automate the installation through a server. So there is a centralized server which will trigger the installation onto a particular system. So even user intervention is not required there. So you don't have to even create a new virtual machine or anything like that. It can automatically happen onto the physical system. And server in the backend is basically monitoring and controlling the complete installation. So these are essentially the three methods that you can use for installing Windows, whether it is a desktop operating system or the server operating system like Windows Server 2019. But you can either do the manual way, you can do it through the automated script, or you can do it through the central server which will trigger the installation for you. But unfortunately here we are going to be only using the manual method. So maybe in another video we can see how to automate the installation using a script. That will probably catch up some other time and do that kind of installation. So it's slowly and gradually moving towards the completion of getting the files ready. So let's wait for a little more while. So while it is doing so, let's talk about the standard versus the data center edition. So when you talk about the standard edition, so it is typically meant for the small and medium sized firms. And when you install a standard edition, then you can also run two instances of the Windows Server 2019 in a virtual operating system as well. So basically what you get is, with a single license, you actually get 3 copies. So one you install on the host system and 2 as the virtual machine. But when you take the data center edition, now data center edition is basically meant for large enterprises where they need to run lot of virtual machines. So once you purchase the data center edition, its license allows one server on the host machine, and then you can run unlimited version of Windows Server virtual machine. So which means that with 1 copy of data center, you can eventually run lot of virtual machines without having to procure additional virtual system licenses. Now, when you talk about the standard edition, so like I said, it is meant only for the small and medium enterprises. It is not meant for the large enterprises. Small and medium firms would typically use it to run like a web server, or they would use it to run a DHCP server, or maybe a DNS server. So majority of the organizations tend to use the Windows environment. So you would have to procure one of the license to ensure that you are running a legitimate operating system. Otherwise, Microsoft tends to track you down and find if there is any kind of pirated version you are using, especially when your system or the Windows Server is facing the internet. Now, data center is, like I said, it is typically meant for the large organizations or the large enterprises where they need to run lot of virtual machines, and they have big servers with the redundancy built in. They have load balancers and all that. So there, a data center edition makes more sense. And so therefore, it makes sense for the large enterprise to use the data center, because eventually with the one license on one single server, you get a lot of unlimited number of virtual machine licenses as well. So that is basically the primary difference between the data center and the standard edition. In this particular video, we are going to be using the standard edition. So it is now proceeding further. So it's done about nearly 50%. So let's see what else we can talk about meanwhile. So I'm just trying to figure out something that I can talk to you, and so that you don't get bored during the installation. And I know it is taking a lot of time, but this is how Windows installation works. And now the one particular version that we have not spoken about is the Essential. Now, Essentials is basically meant for a small set of organizations, the organizations that are limited in number, like 25, 30, 40 people. So their Essential basically fits in well. And some of the key features are, like, if you want to support up to like 25 users and up to 50 devices, then Essential is good. And but however, Microsoft does recommend that you should move beyond Windows Server Essential to Microsoft 365, which is basically new for the small business customers. So there you get new functionalities, like in Microsoft 365, basically you get new functionalities like data storage, sharing, protection, and so on. So, but nevertheless, Microsoft Windows Server Essentials 2019 has enough features to serve a small organization of about 25 people. And just like the previous versions of Windows Server Essential, which was 2016, our 2019 edition also allows you to integrate with the Azure Site Recovery Services and which is basically meant to help you maintain business continuity in case there is a hardware failure or any other kind of failure, or even let's say your virtual machine goes down or the host running the virtual machine goes down. So you can basically use the Azure Site Recovery Services when you're running Windows Server Essentials. And now one of the good thing with this particular service is that it helps you replicate the virtual machines in real time mode to a backup repository or the backup repository in the Azure environment. So when there is a disaster or unwanted event like a host failure, then you can basically fail over the replica and resume your business critical operations. But one of the thing when we started the installation, there was a desktop experience role which is not there in the 2019 essential version. So that has been removed, and so whatever you need to do in that environment, in the essentials environment, you have to do all your management related and configuration related tasks manually. And other than that, client backup and remote web access is no longer available in the essentials version. So on the other hand, when you talk about the Windows Server 2019, basically you can not only run it in your on-premise environment, but you can also run it as a hybrid operation in the Azure environment. So you basically can have some parts of your infrastructure running here, some part in the Azure environment. Now, Standard Edition also allows you to centralize your company's file share by synchronizing your file servers in the Azure environment. That is one good feature. So you don't have to basically run the file services or shared folders in the scattered mode. They can all be centralized now using the Standard Edition. And then you have basically new technologies that you can play around with, like artificial intelligence or Internet of Things. And I've already spoken about running two virtual environments within Windows Server 2019 Standard Editions, and then one license can be used for the host environment. So if you need more virtual machines to run in your infrastructure, then you have to basically procure the licenses. Other than this, Standard Edition also supports up to 2 Hyper-V containers, and the number of Windows containers is unlimited basically, but Hyper-V containers are only 2. So now if you ask what is container, containers are basically they are sort of compartmentalized environments where you can run different applications. So these applications don't tend to interfere with each other. So basically the only drawback with the containers is it has to use the same operating system as your host that is running. So that is what the container is basically. It is like a virtual machine. The difference is virtual machine, each one of them can use a different operating system. Like what I showed you in the start, I had the Mint Linux, CentOS, and then I had the Kali Linux, Windows Server 2019. But that cannot happen in container environment. It has to be the same operating system as your host. So if you're running 2019, all containers will run the same environment, but your applications can run in isolation in terms of they can be running in secure compartments, so they don't tend to interfere with each other. So now let's talk about, by the time installation will get over, so let's quickly talk about some of the nice features that the Data Center Edition offers. So it has also got now the network controller, which allows the centralized infrastructure management, and it helps you monitor, configure and troubleshoot the virtual environment that you're running within the Windows Server 2019 Data Center Edition. And network controller, you can also use it to automate network configuration rather than configuring the devices or doing the network configuration manually. Then another feature that it is it also helps you build a hyper-converged infrastructure. Now, that is basically a very cost-effective method and scalable solution to create a software-defined data center. Now, generally speaking, basically, when you talk about hyper-converged infrastructure, it allows you to consolidate your computing, storage, network resources in one cluster and improve the performance, and it saves you cost. So therefore, that gives you a lot of benefits. Now, quickly, if we talk about some of the features that are available in the data center but not in the standard edition. So shielded virtual machines is one feature that is not available in the standard edition, but it is available in the data center edition. Software defined networking, or SDN, is not available in the standard edition, but it is available in the data center edition. Then you have the Host Guardian Hyper-V support, which is again not available in the standard edition, but it is available in the data center edition. Then when you talk about the storage replica, there is a limited support in Windows Server 2019 standard edition. It can go up to 2 terabytes of a volume, but with data center edition, there is no limit. Basically, you can go do as much as you want. So that is the basic comparison. We talked about the essentials, standard, and the data center edition. All right, almost there. 96%. So just 4% more to go. I think it should be done in another 2 to 3 minutes. It's been approximately 25 minutes since it's been copying files. That's a pretty lengthy duration, but I guess that's how Windows works. Oh, okay. So here you go. It's already installing the update and it's finishing up so quickly. So these are some of the key variants. So there you go. It's already started the virtual machine. So I'm just going to close this notification. So it's restarting the Windows Server 2019. Finally, we are close to getting the installation done. So that's about 35 minutes since we have started. So I'm just going to go ahead and close the notification. So it's getting the system ready to complete the installation. Now, since it's doing the processing, so when you're installing the Windows desktop environment, something like Windows 10 versus Windows Server 2019 or Windows Server 2016, the installation routine is pretty much the same. So you would not see a lot of differences in the installation. It would be the same screens that would continue to appear one after the other. So that happens both in the Windows Server as well as the desktop operating system installation. So if you installed one, think that you can install the others also. So if you have experience in doing manual installation of Windows Server 2019, Windows Server, or rather Windows 10, would be just the similar set of screens. So it's all graphical interface driven. So you have to just select the right option and click next, 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 and whatever time it takes is just about the file copying and getting the installation done. And then once the installation part is over, it basically tries to get the system ready. So that is what you see on the screen. It is getting ready to complete the entire installation process and give you the interface where you can start working. So there would be some configuration that we would need to do before we actually start to use the operating system. So it's already taken a couple of minutes on this screen, and I guess another 1 or 2 minutes and we should be proceeding ahead. And if you want to do this kind of installation, just remember that you can always download the evaluation version of Windows Server 2019 from Microsoft's website, and Oracle Virtual Machine, VirtualBox Manager, or VirtualBox, the product itself, is completely free. You can download it from Oracle's website, and you can also download the 120 days evaluation copy of Windows Server 2019 and try it out yourself. And it's a good experience that you will gain in terms of doing the installation and trying to play around with the operating system after the installation is done. So now that is I always used to tell my team, if you want to gain experience in learning a product, you should learn to play around with that product. So just download and trying to start using it and trying to figure out the way that product works. And this goes for any kind of product. So I rarely go through the documentation. I only basically understand what the basic intent of the application is. I download it and I start using it. Most of the time in hit and try, I learn something which, if I would have just simply followed the steps from the documentation, I would have not been able to remember that. So, but hit and try gives you a long-term memory. You remember how you configured this. But that doesn't mean that you should not read the documentation. You should always read the documentation, but trying to explore the products first. So once I have explored the product, I go back, I try to read and understand in depth, but not in the initial stages. So initial stages is always the hit and try, the R&D kind of mode that I work in. And that way I have done evaluation of hundreds of applications, lot of different versions of Windows, and lot of variants of Linux. And that is the way I basically learned. But I also go back, I research a lot of things on the product itself. I would go back after I have done the installation, explored it a little bit, then I will go back, I will try to learn from the documentation, read some key pointers. Like, for instance, I would learn, okay, if I'm trying to configure Active Directory, how would I do that? So if I can't figure it out, I will go back to the documentation and basically I would read the steps. So here you go. So I am going to just type a password. Okay, so then I have to confirm the password and I would just say finish. So here I've just given a simple password as password, but in real life, you should never do that. You should always ensure your password is complex and it should not be simple one, because simple passwords like the one I have given here, trust me, it can be cracked in less than a second. But because this is a limited environment that I'm running and I'm not going to be, sort of using this virtual machine after this video is over, I'll just simply go ahead and scrap it and do a fresh installation, or rather I already have an installation. So therefore, for the just sake of providing a password, I have provided password. So let's see if it accepts it. So I click finish. Okay, so it says the password you type does not meet the password complexity requirement set by the administrator. So therefore, I would need to change the password. Let's see if I just simply type, okay. Okay, I have typed in a complex password. So let's see if it accepts this password. There you go. So by default, Windows Server has the password policy implemented, which is the complex password policy. So it will not allow you to use the simple password. I just wanted you to demonstrate this, that if you try to use a simple password, Windows Server will not allow you to do that. And this concept or this policy is also now applicable in the other variants of Windows Server 2019, and it also applies in the Windows desktop environment as well. So for example, Windows 10, you cannot simply keep a simple password. Now, what happens is in most of the enterprise environments where the password policy is not implemented, users tend to keep the password as password 1234566, or their own name, their spouse's name, their girlfriend or boyfriend's name, their birth date, and all these can be cracked in few minutes time. So there are a lot of password cracking tools like John the Ripper, Cain and Abel. They can crack these passwords in like password as password or 123456. Both these passwords can be cracked in 1 second or less than 1 second. So you have to understand that it also puts your data and your privacy at stake if you use the simple password. I intentionally was being ignorant and entering the password as password. And if you remember, I also said, let's see if Windows accepts this password, which it didn't. So let's, enough on password. So let's move ahead. Since I've changed the password to a complex one, there you go. So now this is the installed version of Windows Server 2019. So it's taken about 45 minutes. So I will simply do, where did it go? So I need to basically send the Control Alt Del, or from the keyboard I can simply do the host and the del keys, but here I will rather choose this particular option. So there you go. So it should prompt me for the administrator password. So I am going to provide the administrator password and press enter. So because it is logging in for the first time, now it is going to configure the user profile, which is the administrator profile. So every time in Windows environment, whether it is Windows 10 or Windows Server 2019, anytime you create a user and the user logs in for the first time, there is always profile setting that happens for that particular user. So for instance, now you see there are personalized settings that are getting applied. So that is the part of the user profile. Next time when administrator would log in, this process will not run. And if I create another user, let's say Arthur or Josh or John, then if I log in with those users in this particular machine, again the same profile setup process will run. So Nevertheless, let's see what happens. So here you go. So we are finally into our Windows Server 2019 Standard Edition system. Notice that it says it's an evaluation version and it is valid for 180 days. So virtually it is valid for about 6 months. So, okay, do you want your, so there is this network pop-up. So do you want your PC to be discoverable by other PCs and on the network? I would just say yes. So by default, this is the standard behavior. Whenever the Windows Server system starts up, the server manager is the first window that you will see. It will automatically start and it will basically give you an environment to work with. So there is something new, which is the Windows Admin Center that has been brought out by Microsoft, and you can download it, install it, and start using it and start managing your entire server environment with this particular application. So we haven't used this, and we are not going to be focusing on Admin Center in this particular video. So notice that this is the server manager. So this is the first thing we are going to explore. So in the left pane, you have the dashboard, and dashboard basically gives you an overview of what type of roles and services that are running, what kind of roles and features that are configured, how many servers are configured. So basically there is only one server and there is a local server. Then you also have file and storage services that are running on this server automatically. So this is something that will run on each and every Windows Server 2019 by default. So anytime you install Windows Server 2019, this particular dialog box, or rather this particular box, will automatically appear because that is something that is configured by default. And then you have the local server environment. So you click on local server in the left pane. So this is what it tells you. So the top section gives you the properties. So it has the computer name. So we have not changed the computer name. So it's picked up a computer name by default. So if I click on this computer name, I have the option to change it. Notice that this is the full computer name. This is the work group. Now, a standalone system which is not part of any domain will by default fall into a work group. And work group is something, unlike a domain, does not have any centralized administrative environment. A work group is like a peer-to-peer environment where each system is his own boss. Whereas in domain, you have a domain controller, you have to register all your systems into that domain to be part of that domain. In workgroup, there is nothing like that. So even if I install 10 more systems in the virtual machines and put them on the same network, they will all become part of the workgroup. So let's change the name. So here I am going to simply call it. We should always define a meaningful name for the system so that we can identify. So some organization will define it by location, department, and maybe the serial number of the system, or it could be the username. So let's say I am defining the location as Ohio -IT -FL, or rather I would put it as web SRV01. So I'll just make this W capital. So there you go. So I have got the location, I've got the department name, and I've got the server name. So now this kind of naming convention works when your enterprise or your organization is spread out at different geographical locations and you want to track if those systems are part of the same domain. You would want to track them, which server belongs where. So I'm going to keep it in the work group itself, or in fact, I can also change the work group name. But for the time being, I'm not going to do that. So, okay, so it is saying that 15. Okay, so it is actually not taken the last digit, which is the 1. So it is limited to 15 characters. So we've given 16. So it's going to take only up till WebSRV 0, which is fine. So we're going to just leave it like this. Or maybe we will simply go ahead and change it to WebSRV 1. That will make more sense. Now, you must remember, anytime you do this system name change, you will have to restart your system for that name change to be applied. If you don't restart the system, the older name will still continue to be used even though you see the new name, but older name will still apply. So we are just going to leave that for the time being. So it also gives you a sort of, indication. Changes will take effect after you restart the computer. So I can restart now or I can restart later. So let's just choose restart later. So we will not restart it now. Otherwise, it will take another 5-7 minutes before we can actually continue with the video. So notice that the name is still the older one. So if I click on it, it shows me the new name, but till the time I restart the system, this old name will still continue to appear. So then it has other properties like Windows Defender Firewall, remote management, remote desktop, which is disabled, NIC teaming is disabled. Now, when you talk about NIC teaming, you can have 2 network adapters and they become a team and they act like one network adapter. So this could be done for redundancy purpose. It could be done for load balancing purpose. But since we only have one Ethernet, or one network adapter, so this in any case we cannot enable it. And then it tells you what is the operating system version. So it is 2019 standard edition and it is the evaluation copy. And hardware is basically, it's detected that we are using the VirtualBox. So let's move to the right. Last installed update. So it's referring to the Windows update. Never. So Windows update setting is install updates automatically using Windows Update. So now in the enterprise environment, this will be controlled by the administrator. So there will be something called Windows Software Update Service, which is known as WSUS, will be installed, or there may be a third-party software through which the administrator would keep pushing the updates onto your systems. So here, because it is a standalone system, by default, its option is set to download it directly or install it directly from the Windows Update website. So when I just click on this option, I get this particular window where I can configure this particular option. So I can quickly, click on this check for updates button, and it will connect with the Windows Update website and see if there are any kind of updates available. So for the time being, we're just going to go ahead and skip this. So last checked for updates, never. Windows Defender antivirus. If you're not aware of it, Microsoft Windows, be it the desktop operating system or be it the server operating system, it has a built-in antivirus, which is the Windows Defender antivirus. And by default, it has the real-time protection set to on. So which means if any suspicious file or malware is drilled down onto your system, Windows Defender will automatically take action. And so when you click on this particular option, you get this particular setting. So by default, it is on, but you can also switch it off. Then feedback and diagnostics. So there are settings. We are just going to skip that for the time being. And then you have the IE enhanced security configuration, which is set to on. So let's just click on this. And then basically it shows you that, this setting is on for both the administrators as well as the users. And then you have the time zone. You can click on this and change the time zone. Then there is the product ID. For the evaluation version, this is activated. Processors, it is showing you that you have a processor which is running at 1.8 gigahertz. Then installed memory is 2 GB. Total disk space is about 49.46 GB, which is close to about 50 GB. So then it has event viewer running in the second section where it shows you the current events that are taking places. Then there are services. What are the services that are running, or what are the services that are in the stopped mode. Then you have best practices analyzer. So you can use this to analyze what are the best practices that need to be followed. Then we have the performance. So currently, because we have just installed, so you're not seeing any kind of data in this. And then we have roles and features. So there are a lot of features that are installed. So there is Windows PowerShell, which we are going to be talking about later. Then there is Windows Defender Antivirus. And then there is XPS Viewer. So XPS is a file format by Microsoft. You can use it to basically view those XPS files. And then there is a .NET, latest version of .NET that is installed. And then there is WCF services, storage services, file and storage services. So these are the features that are already installed. So now this is what your local server was. And when you talk about all servers, you only have one particular server right now. But you can right click on this particular option and say add servers. So currently, because there is no other server in this environment, so you really cannot do anything about it. So therefore we are just going to go ahead and click cancel on it. But this is where you can actually import servers from your network. And then you have file and storage services. So you have servers, you have events, you have again best practices analyzer, performance, and roles and features. So same thing we saw for the server. Now here we are seeing for one particular server which is selected. So if there are different servers, you can keep selecting those different servers in this section, which is the server section, and it will give you the relevant information like events and best practices and this and that. So it will give you all that. Then we are talking about the volumes. So there is one volume, two volumes rather, that is 49.5 GB, and then there is a system reserved which is nearly about 550 megabytes. And then it gives you the status of the disk, and it shows you, okay, if there are any shares available. Then you can also basically start the roles and features wizard. Now, right now, there is no iSCSI virtual disk available. Then you can click on disks. Again, we get the status of the disk. Storage pool. Right now, there are no storage pool that are defined. So you can define the storage pool. Basically, you can collate a lot of disks and combine them into one storage pool. So from the storage pool, you can basically allocate the information, or rather allocate the space. Now let's look at the top menu. So we have manage. So here we can add, remove features, we can add servers, create server group, or manage server properties. Then we can talk about tools. So there is computer management, there is defragment and optimize drives, disk cleanup, event viewer, iSCSI initiator, local security policy, which we will be looking at later. And then you can also invoke the services snap-in to check which services are running, which are in the shutdown state. And then you can also click the Windows PowerShell environment. And of course, then there is the Windows Defender Firewall with advanced security. So here you can configure the incoming and outgoing traffic. You can configure the ports and the services that can send out or receive traffic from the outside of this system. And then there is the server backup. So then view is basically what is the the size of the environment you want. So by default it is now set to 100, which is okay. So if I do 75%, so it will reduce the size of the window, and then basically therefore it becomes too smaller. So I've reverted back to 100%, which was the default. And then there is the help. If you click on this, you can basically get the help on the server manager environment. So basically this was the overview of the server manager. So we are just going to go back, select the local server, or rather we'll just go back to the dashboard. Now notice that in the top section there are some of the options that are given. So you can add roles and features, you can add other servers to manage, you can create a server group, you can connect this server to cloud services. So let's see what this option, add roles and feature, has. So let's just click on this particular option. So this new wizard that pops up, which is the add roles and features wizard. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on next. Basically there is some description that is given on the before you begin page, and then I have two options, either role based or feature based installation or remote desktop services installation. So I'm just going to keep the default option and then click on next. Then by default, because there is only one server that is being managed, so I'm just going to keep that selected and click on next. Now here are the options. So there are a lot of things that you can do. You can do the Active Directory domain services, federation services, lightweight directory services, RMS or right management services, device health attestation, DHCP server, DNS server, and you can even install Hyper-V to manage more virtual machines. So we are just going to, let's go ahead and select the web server IAS. Now basically the moment you select, another dialog box that pops up. So it says, okay, this is what it is going to be installed. So there are some management tools. So if I just unselect this include management tools options, it will remove all these options. So I'm just going to, again select it and click on add features. And then I click on next. So then there are certain features that it would need. So for instance, .NET Framework 3.7, 2 of 7, which are installed. So if I expand this option, I will just go ahead and select ASP.NET, and then there are some more features. For the time being, we are just going to go ahead and leave all these features as is under the WCF services. And if for some applications do require .NET Framework 3.5 to be installed, so if we need some of those applications to be installed on this particular server, so we would need to have .NET Framework 3.5 installed. So rest of this, I'm going to just leave it as is and go ahead and click next. And then notice that there is new addition of the options in the left pane. So if I go ahead and click previous, and if I select if I deselect web server IIS, notice that those options in the left pane disappear. So if I add features, web server role related options do appear. So I'm just going to go ahead and click next. Keep the .NET Framework 4.7 features enabled. Then on the web server role IIS description page, I again go ahead and click next. Now there are a lot of options that are there. So we are not going to sort of, go ahead and make changes to any of these unless you want to set up a FTP server also. So you can go ahead and say, okay, I need FTP server. So you select this option and then you can go ahead and click next. So now before you sort of, click the install button, you can review what all is going to be installed. So once you are satisfied with these options, you can go ahead and click on install. So this installation is going to take a few minutes, and once that is done, then I will show you how to invoke the IIS management console to manage your web server. So IIS stands for Internet Information Services, which is a web server. So in Linux environment, you have something like Apache. Here you have IIS, but you can also, if you don't want to use IIS, you can also install Apache in the Windows environment as well. But most of the people who are well versed with Windows, they tend to stick with IIS rather than Apache. So because this is a very clean environment where you don't have to do configuration of the uh, configuration through the configuration files. Everything can be done in the GUI environment, and therefore people tend to stick around with the IIS, and it is considered to be pretty secure web server, so you don't have to worry too much about it. And of course, when you have the web applications that are hosted on IIS, then you should always ensure that your web applications are also protected by a web application firewall. Now, web application firewall is different from a typical firewall like Windows Defender firewall in the Windows environment or any hardware firewall. A web application firewall is specifically designed to safeguard a web application. It protects the web application from different types of attacks like SQL injection, cross-site scripting attacks. So various types of attacks are sort of blocked on that web application firewall. So it is always preferred, and large enterprises specifically do have web application firewalls to protect their web applications. So now the installation of IIS is in progress. It should take about a minute or so before it is completed. Notice, because we have not restarted our web server, we have not restarted our server, so the old name is still being reflected, and this is the name that will also get reflected on the web server. So for the time being, we are not going to restart this system because it's going to take around 5 minutes for it to come back into working condition. So we'll just leave that as is, and we'll wait for the installation to get completed. All right, so installation is finally done. So now I can click on close. Notice that there is a new box that appears under the role and server groups. So there is IIS that is there. So if I just click on this, it basically takes me to the IIS node. Now I basically can go ahead and sort of right click on this particular server name and invoke the Internet Information Services Manager or IIS Manager. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's expand this window. Notice that the old name of the server is still being reflected. Now if I simply say I can do a refresh, and then once I expand this particular option, I have a node called sites, and now there is a default website. If I just right click on this particular website, I can simply say manage website, and I can either restart it, I can stop it, I can browse it. So let's click on browse. So it should have opened. All right, so there you go. So because we are using Internet Explorer for the first time, so we are asked to either use the recommended settings or not use the recommended settings. So I will go with the default settings of use recommended security, privacy and compatibility settings. So there you go. So now this particular page, another tab opens. So we just close that, and notice that your web server is up and running. So there are different ways you can access this default website. One is through HTTP localhost, or you can give the IP address, or you can also give the web server name here to access this particular website. And of course, if you configure a domain name along with it, then you will be able to access the website using the domain name. But because this is a default website, we are not going to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this particular window of Internet Explorer. Now there are a lot of options that you can configure in the IIS environment, but we are not going to go ahead and sort of, focus more on it. And I'm just going to go ahead and close this window. And also, because we had a good look at the server manager window, so I think there is nothing much that we would want to discuss about it. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this window also. Now, one thing that we had as an objective is we wanted to basically get an overview of the desktop environment. Now, desktop is pretty much clean. So except for the recycle bin icon, which is the default icon, there is no other icon that is there. So there are certain features like, if you click on this icon, which is the, this particular first icon, so you can basically search for the applications here. So if I simply type IIS, it should give me an option to search for IIS within this. It should basically list down IIS manager. So there you go. I can invoke it from here, or I can invoke it from the start menu. Then, okay, let's just close this. Then second one is task view. If I click on this, if there are any, sort of tasks that we are running and we are monitoring, that those will be available here. The third one is Internet Explorer, and fourth one is the File Explorer. So let's just click on File Explorer. And this is the default view of the File Explorer. So you basically, the starting point is the quick access. So you can go to your desktop and see what is there. You can go to the downloads. Currently, we've not downloaded anything, therefore it is empty. Then there are some default other options like documents and pictures. So nothing is here because this is a fresh installation, so you will not find anything. Now if you expand this PC, again you get, desktop, you get the documents, downloads, music, pictures, and then eventually you also get the local disk. Now there are certain folders in the local disk. So Windows, where the Windows installation is there. Users is where the user accounts are there. Currently there is only one user account of administrator. Then you have program files. Now there are two folders of program files. One is the for x64, which is the the environment that we have installed. And if there are certain x86 or 32-bit version application you're going to install on this 64-bit operating system, then those applications will get installed under this particular folder. So then there are performance logs, and inetpub is the folder for the IIS that we have installed. So under www.root, so this is the page that we will find. So if we just click on this, we'll find this is the same page that we saw as the default website. So this is where your default website is configured. Then we had also installed the FTP option. So FTP root is there, so we can create different folders here and assign access to different users to basically access that particular folder on the FTP server. Now then we also had mapped our DVD or the ISO file to install Windows Server. So this by default gets mapped onto the CD drive on the D colon, which is the D drive. And then of course we have the network. Currently we are not having any system, so the only system you will see is your own system. So therefore you don't have anything. Now file sharing is turned off, so if I just click on this notification and say turn on file sharing, that will, now you'll be able to share files with the other systems as and when they are added onto this work group, or this system is added on to a particular domain. So let's close this. Now let's explore the start menu a little bit. So when you click on this particular icon of Windows, notice that there are two different parts of the menu, rather three different parts of the menu that happens. So one, there are certain icons here which, so this is the administrator icon, then this is the documents folder icon, this is the pictures folder icon, this is settings. So once you click on this, it will take you to the settings page, and this is from where you can basically click on this and you can choose option to restart or shut down. So, and this particular option here expands these options. Basically, rather than just seeing the icons, you get to see the name of the icon as well. And these are some of the options we have for Windows. So we have the task manager, we have Windows administrative tools. We'll get to this Windows administrative tools in a moment. Then we have Windows security, which is basically all the security related options are combined here. So there is the Windows Defender, then there is the Windows Defender firewall, then there is app and browser control and device security. So we are just going to go ahead and go back by closing this, and then we'll again go back to the start menu. So we expand the Windows accessories. So there is calculator, Internet Explorer, Notepad, Paint, remote desktop connection, snipping tool, steps recorder. So you can perform certain steps and you can record it using the steps recorder. Then there is a Windows media player. If you want to watch a movie or if you want to listen to songs, you can create a playlist here of those songs and play them using Windows media player. Then Windows Server backup, you can back up your data using this. XPS viewer, we had already talked about. WordPad is just like a notepad, but it's got little more features than the notepad. Now next comes the Windows administrative tools. Now this is where lot of administration related options are going to be there. So you have disk cleanup, you can defragment. Another one important is the computer management. So we'll basically go ahead and use this option and let's see what happens. So okay, it's sort of configuring the Windows computer management snap-in, and it should start. Here you go. So now notice that there are a lot of options that you can use. So just like Server Manager, this one also has a lot of features. And this is one single snap-in from where you can manage a lot of things. So notice that there is IIS Manager, there is routing and remote access. So if you want to allow people from the outside world of your network to connect to your system, you can configure routing and remote access. Then you can also view what kind of services are running on your system. So it will list the stopped service, services, started services. So all that are like running services. And then you might even find some services that are stopped. So look at this, a lot of running services. Any service that doesn't have a status marked to it is the service that is in the stopped state. And then you have the server backup and you have the disk management. Now disk management is where you would be able to configure a particular disk. So for instance, if you add a disk into this server, then you need to use the disk management to configure that disk. So you can also configure like redundancy. You can do a lot of things in the disk management. I can split this particular disk into two disks by doing shrink volume, and then I can define the size of the second volume. So this disk gets split into two disks, and further I can sort of split that disk as well. As long as there is a free space on this particular disk, I will be able to shrink this particular disk. So there is a device manager. So all the devices that are part of, or all the components that are part of this particular server will be listed here. So there is a display adapter, there is a VirtualBox CD-ROM, there is a human interface device, that is the USB input device, then there is a hard drive that is there, there is the keyboard, mice, monitor, network adapters. So let's see what we have. So we had seen initially Intel Pro 1000/1000 MT desktop adapter, and then we also have the computer, which is basically x64 based PC, and the disk drive, let's see, so it has a VirtualBox hard disk. And then I can also monitor the performance of this particular system. So there is this performance monitor, and if I go ahead and expand this, I can click on performance monitor, and I can add counters to, let's say, monitor, let me see, let's monitor the processor. So I expand this, and let's say user time. So I go ahead and add this and click on OK. Now notice that the graph has started to build. So currently, because there is not much of activity that is taking place, so the graph is pretty low. But as and when more activities happen, and the usage of this particular system increases, then the graph will start to shoot up. So let's just go ahead and move to the local users and groups. So I can simply create new users. Right now there is the administrator and the other 3 default accounts. So there is the default account, guest, and WDAG utility account. They are all in disabled state. So I can simply go ahead and say new user, and let me just create a user with the name Arthur Anderson, and I give the password as a password which is complex. All right, so I can keep this option selected, which is the default option. So anytime you create a user, you will have this option selected. User must change the password at next logon. So I deselect this, and I say password never expires, and I go ahead and create this account. So this account is created. Now I go ahead and close this dialog box. I can right click on this account and select properties. All right, so here you go. Now notice this, there are a lot of tabs. So there is one tab which is very critical to know, is member of. Now by default, every user you create, whether in the domain environment or on a local system, it is added to the users group. Now, however, I want Arthur to be the administrator of this system. So I just say administrators. Notice that the group name has been checked, and I can leave both these as is, or I will simply go ahead and remove the users group. So I click on apply, and then there is profile. If I want this user profile to be a roaming profile and all that, so I can configure this here. Environment, if there are some kind of environment variables that I want to configure, I can do that here in the sessions. Now, if there are any kind of sessions that are left open, so should I disconnect? And this is basically used for remote desktop services. So for instance, from somewhere I connect to this particular server using the remote desktop, and I do not terminate my connection. So after a certain time limit, it will automatically disconnect the idle session. Now I can also set the active session limit. So for instance, nobody should be able to remotely connect to this. I mean, nobody meaning whoever has the permission to remotely connect to this particular server should not, exceed the remote connection session by 30 minutes. So if I set this limit, the moment that remote session hits 30 minutes, it will disconnect the user. So then I can simply say, okay, end the session or keep the session, but disconnect it. Now dial in tab. If somebody wants to remotely connect or allow, access this server from the network, should I allow access or should I deny access? Then there are like enable remote control. Should I allow people to take remote control of this particular session? Then there is a remote desktop services profile. So if there is any kind of profile that we want to configure for the remote desktop services, we can do that here. So here you go. So I'm just going to go ahead and click close. And now this user Arthur, which is this one, is now the administrator of this particular environment or this particular system. Then we have the task scheduler. We can configure a lot of tasks that we want to schedule, so they will automatically run at a defined time. Then there is an event viewer. This is where basically you can see what are the events that are taking place. So there are, by default, there are 4 folders that get generated. So custom views, Windows logs, application and services logs, and then subscription. So let's expand Windows logs. So you have application, you have security, you have setup, you have system, and you have forwarded events. So you can configure other systems to forward events to this particular systems. Now, when those events are forwarded here, they are basically collated under this particular folder. Now, by default, let's see what these have. So system log will have system specific events, and then so there is a setup, any kind of setup related application setup or any kind of feature setup, that kind of event is captured here. Any security related event will be captured here. Then you have the application, which is basically application specific logs. So for instance, software protection service was scheduled to restart. Offline down level migration succeeded. Software protection service has stopped. So any application or feature specific event would be captured in this particular application folder. So that is it about the computer management. So let's go ahead and let's start the PowerShell. So I'm just going to go ahead and select, and I will right click on it, and I'll say run as administrator. So PowerShell starts. Now PowerShell is a very, very powerful environment. So in the Linux, if you are aware of Linux, there are a lot of scripts that you can write, and these scripts can be written in the command line environment. So Windows earlier only had Windows command shell, and therefore it did not have that kind of robust environment to write scripts. So only thing you could do is write some batch files and all that, but batch files don't have that kind of power. Now PowerShell has a lot of predefined scripts which are known as CMDlets. Now CMDlets are basically, they are the batch files, if you say so, or the script files, or those kind of different terminologies can be used, but PowerShell users only refer to them as CMDlets. Some of the features are basically, it can help you automate a lot of tasks. It can let you run commands which are even applicable in the Windows command environment. So if I can say, ping google.com, so there you go. It will execute that command as is. And now the thing is, when you are talking about the CMDlets or the scripts, by default, Windows has a restricted PowerShell environment, and it does not allow you to run any kind of scripts, even if you have created that script. So, and the reason for that is because the scripts can be malicious or poorly written, which can cause a lot of damage to your system. Or, if these are malicious scripts, they can even end up doing other kind of damage like data deletion or even formatting your system. You never know. If you have just simply downloaded a script from the internet, from an unknown site, it might do a lot of damage, even though it doesn't say that it will, but the core intent behind that is not very clear. So I'm just going to go ahead and clear this window. So before we execute any script, we need to basically run this command. So get execution policy. Now there are 4 different environments that we can set with this particular policy or this particular script that or cmdlet that we are going to run. So basically by default, PowerShell is in the restricted mode, so in which no scripts will be executed. So this is the default setting. Then you have the all signed setting, which can run only the scripts that are signed by a trusted software developer or a like Microsoft. But even when you're running any script in the all signed mode, you are prompted to basically confirm the execution. Then you have the remote signed mode, which is basically it allows you to run your own scripts or scripts that are created by the trusted developers. Then you have the unrestricted mode, in which you can run any script you want. Whether you have created your own, you have downloaded from third-party site, or some friend of yours has given a script. But the thing is, you should never ever set your PowerShell into this mode. And then I would say remote signed. Notice one thing, or rather remember one thing, PowerShell commands are not case sensitive like Unix or Linux. So I would just say yes. And I could have also typed A, which is yes to all. So now there are a lot of commands that you can type in. So one of the way is, let's start with some of the easy commands. So for instance, one command that we had already used. So for instance, I can simply say write host hello, and it says hello. So this is something like echo command in the Linux environment. So I can also say write host get date. So it will give us that command only. That's pretty strange. So this is basically the idea, is to sort of appraise you in terms of how you can you can something like work with the PowerShell, and the get command will sort of give you a lot of commands that are there for you to run. So the list is basically, it's too long for us to sit down and discuss this. So for instance, write host we have already talked about. So let's see what other command that we can. So there are a lot of processes that are there in the Windows environment. So you can also use commands like stop process, stop service. So you would need to just provide the name or the number of the process, and it will stop it. And then you can also do a lot of other things, like you can create users, you can delete users, you can automate a lot of tasks using various commands that you can add into a cmdlet and execute that cmdlet. So that is what basically you can do in the Windows PowerShell. So we are not going to sort of go into depth of this, because this is like a tutorial in itself. So we will just go ahead and close PowerShell, and then let's see what else do we need to cover. And so let's invoke the server manager once again. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and close this notification. So let's create a server group. But we will not be able to do much with it, because we only have one server. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this into this particular server group and click OK. Okay, so first I need to define the web server. Okay, so there is one server group that has been added. So that is the server group name. And it shows there is only one server. And when we click on service, then basically it shows whatever has happened. So it shows that this particular service has stopped. So this is what basically a server group is. It is like, you can club in similar kind of servers into a group, and then it's easy for you to manage. So for instance, all file servers can be clubbed into one single group. Another set of web servers can be clubbed into another server group, and there you can basically manage those groups individually. Otherwise, what happens is, if there are too many servers, let's say, when you're talking about 2 or 3, 4 servers, they're still easy to manage. But when you're talking about hundreds of servers, it's very difficult for you to sort of, monitor them and, individually manage them. So it's better to create a server group that can help you manage one single type of servers. So now in the tools menu, we have something called local security policy. So let's click on this, and then we will go ahead and use the local security policy. Now these are bunch of policies that are given in the local environment of a system. But when you are part of a domain, then you have another set of policies which is known as group policies. Now, group policies are applied at the domain level. They can also be applied at the subdomain level. They can also be applied at the they can be applied at the domain level. They can be applied at the site level. They can also be applied at the organizational unit level. So if you are not aware of Active Directory is basically a centralized service that can manage all the systems within a particular domain. And you can have multiple domains added into a single Active Directory, because the entire concept is like a tree-like structure. The topmost entity is the forest. Then you have the domain. Within the domain, you have the sites, or it could work the other way around. Within a site, you can also have domains. Site is the physical sort of breakdown of the forest, whereas the domain and organizational units are at the logical level. So you can have multiple domains in a site or multiple sites in a domain. So then organizational unit comes under the domain, because you define organizational units or OUs in a domain. Within one OU, you can have users, you can have groups. And there are different policies you can apply at different levels. So for instance, when you apply a password policy in the local environment of a system like this one, it is applicable only to this particular system. But when you talk about the password policy at the domain level, or rather password policy in the domain environment, it is always applied at the domain level. So there is only one password policy that you can add at the domain level. Password policy cannot be applied at the forest level or site level or the OU level. It is always at the domain level. So whatever policy you apply, password policy you apply at the domain level, it applies to all the users, but you can still add some exceptions like senior management. You can keep them out of the password policy using exceptions. Now, in the local policy, you have different nodes or different folders. So you have password account policies, under which you have the password policy, and you have the account lockout policy. Now, when you talk about the password policy, notice that it is already configured. So enforce password history. Now, if I enable this, let's say if I say remember last 3 passwords. Now what will happen is, so today I used the password as 1. My second password was 2. Third password was 3. Now, after 2, if I revert, or rather want to revert to password 1, I will not be able to do that. So I will need to at least change 3 passwords before I can go back to that password 1. So for instance, I will have the password 1 as the first password 2 as the second password 3 as the third password. only after password 3, I can go back to the first password. Then the maximum password age is 42 days. It will prompt you few days before. It will start prompting you to change the password. Minimum password age is 0. So which means I can change password in a day as many times as I want. Minimum password length is 0 character. Password must meet the complexity requirement enabled. Now, minimum password age, I can say, okay, once a user changes the password, he should not be able to change that password for at least one more day. Then, basically the minimum password length, if you talk about at the organizational level, it is usually 8. Now, this is the real password policy we are talking about. So you need to have at least 3 passwords remembered. Minimum or rather maximum password age is 42 days. In most scenario, people also set it to around 70 to 80 days, which is also fine. Minimum password age is 1 day. If you change password today, for next 24 hours, you will not be able to change your password. Then minimum password length should be 8 characters. And the password must meet complexity requirements is enabled by default. This is the reason, if you remember, in the installation, we were not able to set a simple password. So it prompted that the password did not meet the complexity requirement. So this policy was the culprit. This policy was the reason why it did not allow us to keep a simple password. And then we have the account lockout policy. Now, this policy is very critical in any environment, and especially in the organizational environment, in the domain environment, it is very critical. Now, the reason is, what if somebody is brute forcing your password on your system? So if you do not have this policy enabled, that person will continue to execute the brute force commands or keep on trying the passwords one after the other till the time that person succeed in getting your password. So therefore, now what happens when this policy is enabled? This policy will block your account or disable, this policy will sort of lock your account if there are so many incorrect tries. So let's say if I set this to 3, it will automatically configure the lockout duration and reset account lockout counter after 30 minutes. I'll just explain you what these means. Now, after 3 invalid logon attempts, your account will get logged out for next 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, it will automatically get reset into enabled state. Now, this policy on the local system, because we are using the local environment or rather a standalone environment, this is fine. But in domain environment, this policy gets drilled down to every single system that is part of the domain, and therefore, even if a user himself tries 3 invalid passwords, that account is going to get logged out for 30 minutes. Then either the user waits for 30 minutes or requests the IT administrator to re-enable the account. So these are some of the policies. Then you have the local policies, you have the audit policies. You can enable auditing. You can also, have user rights specific policies, like who can create a page file. Now, page file is a temporary swap file where, if your memory is full, the data gets into the page file, then from page file, it goes into the memory. So it helps you sort of, speed up your environment. Then who can change the time zone on the system, who can change the system time, and who can log on locally. Now, if you see, there are 3 different entities, 3 different groups that are added into this. So there is the administrator, there is the backup operators, and there are the users. So by default, these 3 are there. So I can also say, remote desktop group that can also log on locally onto this system. So there is a difference between remotely logging on and locally logging on. Locally means that you are physically basically sitting on the system and logging in. Then there is the security options. Now, by default, we saw the guest account is in disabled state. So this is the policy that is already enabled. Now, if we want to rename the guest account, we can simply say temp. Okay. So the guest account will no longer exist. It will be the temp account. It is basically the name change that has happened. And similarly, it can be done for the administrator account. So instead of administrator, we can simply say admin, or we can say Arthur, or give it any logical name. So that can be done. Then you have the Windows firewall with advanced security. Now you can configure that environment and you can basically set down some of the rules and you can set down the properties using this particular node. And then you have network list manager policy. So this is basically related to the networks that are there within the system. And public key policies are basically to do with the certificate services. So if there is a certificate that has been assigned by a public key authority or a certificate authority, that can be configured here. Then you have the software restriction policies. Now, in the software restriction policy, you can allow the software to be installed or uninstalled or block the users from installing particular applications. Then you have the application control policies. And basically, once you expand this group, you have the app locker, which does essentially the same service as the software restriction policies. Then you have the IP security policies. Now, IP security is basically IPsec, which is a protocol, which is a method to encrypt communication between two systems. So you can encrypt communication between this system and the web server. So any unencrypted information then will not be entertained. So it depends how you configure this particular policy. Then you have the advanced audit policy configuration. Now here you can basically configure different types of accounting for your system. So this is pretty much it for the local security policy. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this, and let me see if there is anything else that is left out. And I think we've pretty much covered everything about the objectives that we had discussed in the initial stage. So let me just quickly check. So we talked about introduction to Windows Server 2019. We talked about the versions of Windows Server, desktop overview, server manager, roles and features, adding other servers to manage, creating a server group. We also talked about different tools that are there. We also talked about computer management, Windows PowerShell, local security policy. And then the last thing that is remaining is the installing applications in Windows Server 2019. Now, there is nothing difficult about installing any application on Windows Server 2019. So for instance, I can simply go on to the network and say www.freewarefiles.com. So let's see. I'll just download something and we'll do quick installation. Okay. So after the file is downloaded, basically a security scan is run just to ensure that file is not a malware or does not contain a malware. So once that scan is over, I simply click on run. And then I basically go ahead and say I accept the agreement. And it's a simple, just like any system, you would install your application and it would become available. Now, going back to the local security policy, I can block a user from even installing an application or running that application. So I can do that. But the idea here was to sort of, see. So I just Alicode after the installation starts automatically. So basically I select create a new HTML project and there you go. So it gives me a brief sort of skeleton of the HTML page. So I can save this page, go back to the IIS manager, host it there and browse. So the idea is not to cover how to code an HTML page in this. But basically, I think we have covered all the objectives in this particular video. And hopefully you enjoyed the video. I know some places it took a little more time and it did not sort of, work in the expected way in terms of like PowerShell sort of, started to misbehave and went into a hang. And then Internet Explorer also, the configuration we had to redo to be able to configure the file download. But other than that, I think we've spent about nearly 2 hours in understanding what Windows Server 2019 is and what it is capable of. So we looked at a lot of stuff. We looked at the, we talked about the introduction to Windows Server 2019. We talked about different versions of Windows Server 2019. We also did a quick overview to the desktop. We talked about the server manager, and I think we spent quite a bit time on the server manager. We also looked at the roles and features where we installed IIS or the Internet Information Services. And then we also looked at adding other servers to manage, since we didn't have any other server, but we looked at the procedure or the steps to add another server. We created a server group. And then we looked at various tools that are available. So it looked at the auditing, we looked at the computer management console, and then we also looked at installing applications, in which we have just installed the LeCode HTML editor. We talked about Windows PowerShell. We executed a few commands within Windows PowerShell, and then we also had a good look at the local security policy. Thank you very much, and I hope you did enjoy this video, and I shall see you in the next video then. Thank you very much.